is that pressure, but there's also the like, oh, these easy monthly payments, which seem manageable in the moment because we don't have an actual look at what the long-term cost is. We'll often put like, people will think, oh, I have a $500 car payment, but it's at 0% interest. So they think, oh, it's free money. But when you take $500 a month and you put it in a compound interest calculator and you look at what that would, like what that actually costs you out of retirement, it's millions of dollars. So now your little Toyota 4Runner isn't just $500 a month, it's millions of dollars out of your future retirement if you're not careful. So it actually has nothing to do with 0% interest.
Hey, welcome back to the Oz Shift podcast. As always, we're here to have some fun and talk to people who have these unique life experiences and can teach us how to make shift happen, hence the Oz Shift. And today we have a guest that I'm actually curious to talk to because the thing that they do is unique but necessary. There's a point in time back when I want to say like 2013, the end of 2013, and I had a torn Achilles. I had a gym business that was tanking at the time, and I actually couldn't pay rent at my gym business or my townhouse. I had to borrow $5,000 from my ex-wife to get the rent paid and have an extra little bit of money to buy my kids Christmas presents from Walmart. And while you're probably going, what in the world are you telling me this for, Aunt? I'm telling you because I was in debt. I was not making money. I was not saving money. And I had to find a way to get out of debt. Now, godsend, man, I was able to push through and get a contract that paid for a lot of things. But it took me a while to climb out of debt. And this person has a book called Get the Hell Out of Debt, which is kind of the thing where not only is it a necessity to figure this thing out, but there's a freedom on the other side. And when you've done that, like this person's done, having gone through levels of being $2 million in debt and climbing out, you have some things to teach. So if you're a person who's like, man, I don't want to be in debt, or maybe you want to be on the flip side and stay on the flip side, this person's an individual to talk to. So without further ado, and welcome to the show, my new friend, Erin, Skye, Kelly. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you. I'm like super excited to hear more about your journey as you call that, because that's pretty fascinating and a pretty vulnerable place to be, right?
Oh,
like
it sucked.
Scary stuff, not being able to pay
anything.
Rent.
Oh, I remember like I had so my wife, ex-wife, she's now my current wife again. We were divorced and got back married. But like I remember I had a torn Achilles. I was scootering around Walmart trying to find a way to like buy things. I had like $100 extra. It's a sad place to be, man. And then you don't want to tell anybody. And then it's, but now I'm like, I got out of the place and I could easily be like, oh, I'm great, but I wasn't great. But here's how we start this. I want you to talk way more than me. I don't like talking too much because they could listen to me elsewhere. This is your time. Here's a question I start with. You can take it wherever you want to go. If I'm walking around town, I sit down next to you and you start talking to me for no reason whatsoever, why should I listen to you?
I love that you always start with this question, and it makes me laugh because I really don't think people should listen to me. I really don't, because here's the deal. When you are in a state of financial distress, the person you really need to listen to is you. There is something inside you that's telling you, like, this is not okay. Because there are other people out there who happily live with debt and payments every month.
They do.
And, they credit card to credit card, they 0% over here, and they transfer the balance, and they feel just fine about it. But if you are somebody who is like, I don't want to live this way anymore, just like you were expressing that you went through, then I really want you to listen to yourself. And then, of course, find the source that makes sense to you, like do the research and find the right resource that's going to help you get out of debt. But my story is that I thought I was doing everything right. I was reading all the money books when I was a teenager, and I started investing in real estate and doing all these things. And I thought I was just killing it. And I woke up one day like feeling like, gosh, why don't I have any money? If I am this wealthy on paper, why don't I have any cash? And realized I was $2.1 million in debt, and was like, I have got to change this. And so my experience is just that I had to figure out what was actually going on. I had to really learn how money actually worked. And then since then, of course, I've helped thousands of people pay off millions of dollars in consumer debt. But but the person you need to listen to is you.
I like that. And my first thought goes to like, what am I listening to, right? Because you said there's some people that'll just let this ride, the rock and roll. But I think there's always going to be that voice of like, hey, stop. You don't need those damn shoes. Like, so if you listen to that voice, it's not going to serve you well. Like what does the voice sound like? And what is it like to listen to it? What does that feel like for people?
It just feels gross. It's that sense of, it's a lot of shame and a lot of like, I should
Yeah.
know better. I should this, like you're just shitting all over yourself. You're
Yeah.
just covered in should. And so it's that piece in you. It's more of a knowing, I guess, than a sound, but it's, you just know it. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
There's always a point in our lives, no matter where it is, where you know you have that line in the sand, right? It's the same line in the sand that, you had when you're exiting a relationship that's challenging, same line in the sand when you're like, nope, we're doing this, and you get back in the relationship, right? It's that it's that piece inside you where that your true inner wisdom comes from, but it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
So
It sounds like it's psychological too. It's I always feel like there's some tide. I read a book. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I'm hoping you have. It's called The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist.
you're kind of famous. I love that you have this humility about you, but you're kind of famous. So yes, but keep talking.
Yeah, it's a good book, but I was like, this is a really cool book, and it helped me get a lot of things figured out. And so for me, like, what are your thoughts on having dealt with a lot of people in this? What goes into like the psychology of what's going on behind the scenes? Because my assumption is to work through it, I first have to notice maybe a mental pattern. Do you start in that realm at all?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that complete self-awareness of not only how you interact with money, but how money works in general, because most of us grow up assuming like, everybody, like when they're a kid, they think like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be in the NFL. I'm going to make a squajillion dollars. I'm going to be rich and be a rap star. I'm going to be the next Adele, like big, big dreams, big money. And then nobody thinks to themselves, when I grow up, I want to have a ton of credit card debt and feel very, very stressed about how I'm going to buy Christmas presents at Walmart, right? Like nobody dreams of that. But what happens is we enter into a financial system that is designed to get us into payments and to keep us there so that the banks can profit. That's how it works, right? But we go into it without an awareness of that. We go into it thinking, I need a credit card in order to get a good credit score in order to buy a house one day. Like we go into it from a very different perspective than what's actually happening. So when you can kind of step back and be aware of not only like how you got into the situation in the first place, how it was designed to get you there, but then how you behave with it is critical. Because you're right, it absolutely has everything to do with mindset and awareness and very little to do with anything else. So it really is like you really kind of do a forensic study on your own life to figure out how you got where you are and then how you're going to get out of it.
So I like that. Like the forensic study is a good one because no one likes to do that. There's that deep dive. I just got done recording some curriculum stuff for our courses. And one of them was talking about, like, we call it identity audit. It's actually doing this whole deep dive on you. And it's the ickiest part for people. It just always is. And it's because we have this good ability to have a facade that everything's okay. But actually, it brings me to that thought of the book by Kiyosaki, like Rich Dad Poor Dad. Now, I haven't read the book. Cliff notes seem to linger in my head.
How have you not read that book?
Right?
How have you been on this planet?
My best friend Jason read it, and we talk a lot, and so he brings it up a lot. I feel like I've read it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the weirdest thing. But I talk about it to my kids all the time, and I'd watch one of his videos. Believe me, I know. Shame on me.
You know the book then, yeah.
Yeah. But I think the thought is I grew up in that space where, it's, hey, I want to buy things where I look like I have money, and I got these cool shoes, and look at the rims on my car. And so for some reason, thankfully at one point I was broke, probably part of it. And I got out and I'm like, I don't need rims on my car because when I'm driving, I can't see those. So I don't care about those. How do you take that kind of rooted thing of I got to look good and switch it? Because while he talks about it, I don't think he goes in the depths of what's going on or how to adjust that or shift it.
Right. And I think that that's the part where that self-awareness comes in too, right? Because for somebody else, rims might be the most important thing. They're like, I actually care more about impressing the people that I drive by than I do. But instead, I'm going to then do this other thing over here, which helps me build wealth instead. So it's really about like nailing down what is important to you, because especially today, I have to say, like in this culture that we're in, where we're putting everything online and we're very much Instagram, Pinterest worthy people. We do have to be really careful because there's no limit to what you can purchase these days. The consumerism.
You could buy real estate on a server. It's crazy. You could buy. I heard a company paid millions of dollars for like a block on a digital server. I could probably hold my iPhone. It is nuts. What's it's weird when I think about it. My kids say, "Dad, can I buy this skin for Fortnite? For what? What are you gonna do with that, man? It's $25 gone. So you have this digital T-shirt." Oh my goodness.
I know. I hear ya. But that's the thing, right? Is like for some people that will be important, and really understanding for you what matters to you. Like, what do you value? where are you in alignment? It's like a lot of like what you talk about with identity, like who do you see yourself as?
Yeah.
And is there a way you can get that feeling without spending money? Like, what are
Ooh.
you actually trying to get after here, right?
Okay.
And how do we replicate that? And sometimes it does mean treating yourself to something. I'm like you, I could care less about the rims. My vehicle just has to have enough cup holders. Like
Yeah,
that's
there you
my
go.
thing, right?
Same.
Got to have a butt warmer and a warm steering wheel, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
But for other people, it means something completely different. So
I
it's
get
getting
you.
really clear on what is your priority, how it aligns with you and your values,
Mm-hmm.
and how it's actually going to help you in the long run. So if you don't have a vision for your life, if you don't have a vision for who you are and where you want to go, what ends up happening is like Amazon has a vision for your life, right? The
Oh yeah,
Lululemon has a vision for your life. Like
they
there's
do.
lots of other places that have a vision for how you live your life, and we get sucked into those because we
Yeah.
look at those ads or we look at those things and think, yes, that's how I want to feel.
Hmm.
And so lacking that mastery over your own emotions is usually the thing that will get you into debt real
That's
fast.
big, and like they talk about, there's that documentary, The Social Network. Like there's a whole bunch of people in the background trying to get you to do things that you're unaware of. It's craziness.
Yes.
I'm thinking of like as I talk to you, like I always find that people I listen to, I want to know where they're at, right? So as I'm hearing this, I'm like, well, what are your values? Like, what are the things that are important to you? Like, let's say currently, maybe and we don't got to worry about the past, but at this moment in time, like, what are the most important things to you that drive your thoughts?
Well, I think when you get close to losing everything like I did, like the people become most important. That doesn't happen to many people. You have to
Hmm.
really go through like a tremendous
Yeah, you do.
pain point to really get to that place sometimes. And it's okay. It doesn't matter where you're at. But mine is like the core relationships around me. Like my kids absolutely come first. And I hear a lot of people say my children are the most important thing,
Yeah,
but it doesn't, when you look at their bank accounts, it doesn't align with the spending. So
true.
it's really about like, am I like, are those things aligned for me? So of course mine is family and children and my partner and my friendships and stuff like that. And I
Yeah.
also, um, there's a whole community that I serve. I work for the number one motivational speaker in the world, and he has like a massive following, and we're doing these virtual events and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And so another thing that's come into my life since that started happening is those people that log into the Zoom that are there for a 4-day or 5-day Zoom event.
Hmm.
Um, that is also who I'm serving
Yeah.
in the right, like their transformation is what I'm after and what
Hmm.
I'm serving. And so it makes it easy to then go, well, actually, I don't need to wear a $700 blazer
Yeah.
for that necessarily, right? I just have to show up and serve them, and I can
Yeah.
be exactly who I am right now in this moment and still obtain that
Hmm.
without looking a certain way. Because I used to, when I started in this industry, you get asked to speak on a big stage or whatever. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to wear
All
like an
about me.
outfit that
Yeah.
shows my level of success. So
Yeah.
I was like, even after I'd done this financial healing, I would still get caught up in this thing of like, I was like, wait a second, that's false. Like,
Yeah.
who am I? I wear Nike shoes, like, or
Yeah.
whatever shoe, right? I wear comfortable shoes
Yeah.
anyway. I wear, like what is, and really being clear on that became really important for me. What's yours? Like, where are
That's a
you at
great
with that
question.
stuff?
Look at you flipping it back on me. Oh, I
Well,
wasn't supposed. I'm joking.
this is a
No,
conversation.
no. The thing for me, so there's been stages, always stages to it, right? I think right now my big thing, and it will always be this, is I'm in season of dad. So like dad is this big. I just got done writing what's called legacy letters to all three of my kids, and it was like a good journey to do it all. And they got it, and like two of them cried. The third one, he ain't ready yet. Hopefully, he better cry. I'm just kidding. But that's the
That's
anchor for
cool.
me. It's like everything revolves around how are my kids taken care of? Are they taken care of for the
Yes.
future? My financial responsibility is not just to have them have things, but understand how to get it themselves, like later on, be able to have that.
Yes.
My relationship with my wife is huge because if I don't have that, I'm no good in the world. Like if we're not good, I can't talk to you like this, if that makes sense. Like it's just, I don't have that same, you know? And then
Yeah.
my health is big, making sure my knees don't pop and hurt. It's a big piece of it all. But then at the same time, that's professional, right? And I call this hustle harmony. I love to do the work I do. There's this monster that has to be fed to create, to grow, to build, to impact. But I can't
Mhm.
feed that monster everything and leave nothing for the rest of what I just described. And so
Right.
what's important to me is also realizing that that monster has to be fed because if I'm over here, I'll feel guilty for not feeding that. So it's always that matter of harmony. And that's what's important to me right now. It's odd that you say that thing about clothing and stuff because I'm always the guy. I've forever been like, I'm an athlete. I'm going to wear these shoes and these unfitted jeans that just loosen my ankles. So recently my team was like, you got to stop doing that, man. like, like you kind of got to start like leveling it up because you look borderline some days like you just threw that on. I'm like, I did. How did you know? So so I'm in this
Well, there
place.
is a
Yeah.
fine line, right? You also don't want to like schlump a dinka your way through life, right? That doesn't
Yeah.
show self-respect either. So it
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
fine line.
They say the
But I
outside's how you
love
feel inside.
that you did legacy letters. I talk about legacy letters in the book, Get the Hell Out of Debt. And I
Oh, do
love that you
you?
gave them but I love that
Oh,
you gave them to your children now. I tell you to like write them in case anything ever happens to you, that they've got like you put them with your will and all that kind of stuff, so that
yeah.
long after you've passed, if you've left on a bad note, like that morning you had an argument about who didn't put clothes in the hamper and then something happened to you,
You
they
have it
will
there.
your last words to them won't be like, put your socks in the hamper.
Yeah.
But I love that you did it. You wrote them a legacy letter.
Yeah, I got a
And
buddy who does it. Yeah, and then I took 10 guys through it with me last June, July, I want to say. And then it
yeah.
took a while to finally conclude it and put it together. But it kept lingering, it kept moving. I was like, no, this is it. So I spent the last 6 hours and the last 2 hours each morning just sitting and writing it all and getting it done and gave it to him. And then my goal is is so that they have those ongoing. I have it in a Google Doc. There's an access to it. My wife knows where the link's at. So, God forbid. But I'm going to record my voice reading it. So they have dad's voice reading it. But then every year, in the new year, I just add to it. We do some of at the end of the year for our family. So I'm just going to tuck away and write another page for each kid about how I felt that year. So they'll later on, hopefully it's 50 more of these things, have dad's voice and everything for every kind of year going forward.
This is well, I don't do mine digitally. I've like what we call love journals that we make every year, and they're for each kid. They have like put photos or like ticket stubs to things or like what I'm proud of or like, and it's just like, and they've got volumes and volumes of them too. So basically, if you and I die, we're the greatest parents ever.
Right?
Aside from that, right?
Right now, I'm good.
No, but there is something to be said for that level of love and care and attention. And I think like when you can then align your life with when you're saying that this is what's important and that's shining through in what you're talking about, your digital legacy letters, that annual practice that you're doing every year.
How do you think that
that's
ties
incredible.
into the aspect of I guess getting out of debt? Because that's one thing I would not think was in the book. You said that. And it's serendipitous. I've never talked about a legacy letter ever. It just happened that today of all days was the day I gave him. So that was God. But what's the tie-in for the book there? How does it help you with debt?
Because I think it's really about it's about emotional debt when you go into it. And I'm not talking about people who have to there's a whole privilege aspect that, you know what I mean? I'm not talking about the systemic issues we're having with poverty and that kind of debt. That's a whole other problem that I really believe we all have to work together to solve. But when I'm talking about a privileged person has too much garbage on their credit card because they're trying to feel a certain way, that emotional debt is actually taking away from life. And so when we can reverse engineer it, and we just in the book, we talk a lot about removing shame and living authentically and all of it. There's very little math in the book. It's really more about living.
Interesting.
And creating that identity that you teach so well and so brilliantly. But what has to happen when you're doing any visioning for your life, whether it be, I got too much debt or whatever, you really have to look at why. And when that emotional debt is present, we're not living the purpose we're intended to live. You're not being the best father you can be. You're not showing up to your wife the best way you can be when you're totally stressed about finances.
Yeah.
And it causes us to make decisions that aren't healthy. So in order to get that feeling, because you feel so terrible, as a parent, you're like, oh, I should, I'm working so hard. I'm going to take the kids to Disneyland. So out comes another credit card and off comes all the spending because you're trying to create a feeling that you're not getting because you haven't done the work inside to feel whole. And
That's
so
crazy,
it really is related. And the whole purpose of all of it is, the whole point in being financially free or getting to be debt free is so that you can serve others. There's no, yes, of course, I want you to buy a yacht if you can afford a yacht. Absolutely have a yacht. But have a yacht so that you can celebrate with the people that you love, or so you can have cool experiences with the people that you love. Give tons of money away to causes that matter to you. When a friend's friend posts something on Facebook that's a GoFundMe for somebody you don't know about, but the story just touches you, pile some money in that person just because you can. And that's really where those feelings that we're after, those dopamine hits, that's really where they have meaning and they're purposeful and they allow you to live out whatever life it is that you're meant to live, instead of being like, I feel really terrible about myself right now, but I'm going to get a dopamine hit from buying this thing at the mall that I really don't need. I'll worry about paying for it later. Yeah.
It just catches
up. So
up.
the legacy is it's the reason why we would bother getting out of debt in the first place.
Yeah. That makes sense now. It does. Because I think for me, what we talk about in a lot of our work is guilt. There's a lot of this. We operate in a state, identity-wise, that's doing things to create micro actions of guilt, right? Micro guilt from I didn't eat the healthy thing today, or I bought this thing. And so what it sounds like you're talking about is they'll go ahead and buy the trip to Disneyland, right? To help the kids feel like they're great. But then now I have this riddled guilt inside of like, I got to pay for this. I don't know how. I'll take care of it later. And why am I doing this? I suck. Oh my gosh. Oh, hey, get some more popcorn. And there's that consistent little, and then it's hard to live full, and you feel like the imposter. And I think it's even worse when people try to step into the world of like what I do, right? Or like talk and speak, right? Like you do. If you know that's back there, like God forbid somebody finds out that I can't pay my mortgage, like there's that weird little monster that goes on. So I see what you're saying there. Like it's almost like creating that letter because it's now real. I better not live my life in a way that's going to mess that up.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That makes sense.
Well, and I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say also that like when you declare it, like when you put it into something as meaningful as that, when you have like that heart to heart level, kind of come to Jesus moment, right? With your kids or like with your partner or whatever. And you have that honest, real vulnerable conversation. This is how I feel. This is what matters. This is what, I love. It's transformative. So it already starts the work in motion, like you're saying, like you're declaring it into being. Whereas when we just think these things, they kind of swirl around inside us, but they're equal with, oh, I'd also really like to get that car. I'd also really like to, like, we're not really creating something like a plan. So when you take all that information that's swirling inside you and you put it outside yourself, you write it down or whatever, now you can look at it all and prioritize and really start to make a plan. If we just let it swirl and fester and we think about it, we don't actually ever get further ahead.
No, it's all feelings, and feelings are fleeting. I tell people it's that, I think that's one of the core of my work. When I get down to it, I try to get us into action. I tell them action ends suffering. Like the action of what you got going on, like that's all great, but there's that suffering, and until you
That's
do,
a meme.
right? Should it be?
That's a meme.
But the thing is, like you said, most people are banking on the action to take place because the emotion I feel now. But you're gonna go to bed and wake up tomorrow, focus on work or something, and the emotion disappears, and now it's not getting done. But if you're saying it's out of my head, it's onto a schedule or calendar or paper, just there where I can see it. Now it's like, oh, I got to do that because I can focus on it now.
Yeah. You know what really helps actually is this exercise called the 4 classes of experiences, which I learned from Tony Robbins. And it's basically where you take everything that you do in terms of like a habit or behavior in like a given week, for example, right? And you divide them into 4 categories. So class 4 experiences, those are things that don't feel good and they're not good for me. So that would be things in the financial, you can do this with fitness, finance, relationships, whatever, but we're talking about money today. So those would be things like, don't feel good and not good for me are like
Gambling.
What's that?
Gambling, losing and gambling, maybe?
Gambling. Yeah. Right. Anything like that. Not opening credit card statements, like avoiding collector calls, that kind of a thing. Right.
Yeah.
Class 3 experiences. These are things that feel good, but they're not good for me.
Gotcha.
So those are things like where, I'm going to buy something on credit, even though I don't have the money to pay for it because it feels good right now, even though I know it's not good for me. Right. Those are things like, I'm going to procrastinate this. It feels good right now, but I'm just kicking the can further down the road, right? Things like that.
That makes sense.
So you sit down and you like spend time and you think about all the behaviors that I do that are class 4 experiences. You write all those down. All the class 3 experiences, write those down. Class 2 experiences, these are things that might not feel good, but they are good for me. So that's things like making a budget, sticking to a budget, saying no, having hard conversations with my spouse about money, like all those kinds of things. Make a huge list of
paying off your credit card debt.
And then class 1 experiences, these are things that feel good and are good for me. So this is really where you're living like, money's coming easily. I'm paying all my bills. I'm also putting money away for retirement. I'm making great investment decisions, that kind of a thing. And you lay it all out and you look at it. And what you'll find most of the time is that you're making promises to yourself in class 2 experiences. You're saying, these are the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
But the behaviors that we're living out are actually class 3 experiences. And the line in between those two is our personal line of integrity. And when we are spending the majority of our time in class 3 and 4 experiences, we think oftentimes like because it's making us feel good that we're doing self-care. Like you'll hear a lot of women especially say things like, oh, I'm, going to treat myself. But what we're doing is we're self-soothing. We're not actually doing self-care.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
Self-care lives on class 1 and 2. That lives over on that side of things. That's where you're actually doing things that are good for you in spite of how it feels. So when you can like set out that framework for yourself, and I think I talk about it in chapter 10 in the book and give like some fun little charts that people can fill out.
Yeah.
But that for me was so eye-opening because I was like, oh, I see a pattern here, right? I'm really able to see where I keep saying like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. But this is how I'm behaving, and making that slight change to action, like what you were just talking about, it ends the suffering.
Yeah.
Because now I'm shifting out of this like needing to feel a certain way. And now I'm creating a life for myself that actually does help me feel that way long term, not just short term.
Yeah. That's big. I love how you broke that down. That way I've never seen it in my head. Like that's really, I mean, I love little pictures and quadrants and frameworks. That stuff helps my brain think through stuff. And it's big. But the thing is, most people won't do this. Like as much as they're hearing it, someone's like, cool idea. And they won't. And I'm wondering why. Like, have you ever pondered on that? Why, when given the information someone needs to succeed, why do they run from it?
Oh, you know why? It's that comfort zone, right? It's like, this is the devil I know. As soon as we start to get uncomfortable, it's, like, and I get like that too, right? I have to consciously remind myself often, like, hey, sit down and do this. Like, take the time and do this. And, you know, we all have that like little zone of comfort that we like to fall back into. Now, you are the type of person who you're so used to being uncomfortable. That's why you have the success you have, because you've trained yourself to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Most people haven't.
Yeah.
Most people haven't. It's like it's just easier to stay where we are. And the other thing that happens in growth, and you know this, but I'd love to hear how you explain it. But how I explain it is like, you know, when you get a balloon from the dollar store and you go to blow it up the first time, right? It's tight.
Hard.
So you have to like stretch it, and you're like, you know, you're like blowing on, it's like hard. But then once it's inflated and you let it go, it contracts, right?
Yeah.
But then the next time you go to blow it up, it's easier. And so growth is a lot like that, where we expand ourselves, we get outside our comfort zone, we do things that don't feel good, but they're good for us. And then almost immediately our body, our soul, our mind, everything is like, let's go back to Doritos on the couch. Like, let's go back to where we're comfortable.
Yeah.
And most of us will then go, oh, shoot, I failed. I'm no good at this. I can't do it. But what we have to understand is that's natural. That's part of growth. We can't continually grow all the time. That doesn't work. It's like a rest phase, which is necessary for growth.
Like climbing Mount Everest, space camps.
So instead we're like, you know, I just blew up the balloon. I let it go. Now, next time I go out of my comfort zone, it's going to be easier, and I'm going to stretch again. And understanding that like both of those things are okay. So then now when you go, okay, I'm going to do this really big, scary thing. I'm going to sit down and do a budget, or I'm going to sit down and understand investing so I can start to build some wealth. And we do that. You have to understand that you should probably plan now to then have a rest phase. Like, I'm going to do this budget, and then I know I'm going to watch Netflix for an hour and a half, and that's okay. And just give yourself permission to do that, so that the next time you go to do the budget, it's not as scary.
Yep. I agree. I think it's funny you use a balloon because I use a balloon as like some of my examples. So I talk about like identity is this thing where some people get it, but the majority are still learning it, right? And I go, how can I make it make sense for individuals? And I go, well, the difference between certain identities is just their sheer capacity. Can I handle hardship? Can I handle the focus like you just talked about for an hour and then I got to take a break, right? Some people like, I can rock and roll through 7-8 hours straight and I'm golden, right? Some people get through an hour of my day and they're like, bro, I got to go take a nap. You know, like, and the only difference is I blew the balloon up a lot. And the thing is interesting, once you blow the balloon up, it never goes back to its beginning state. It's always a little bit more expanded. And it eventually gets, if you leave a balloon expanding for a while, it's all loose and floppy, right? But it doesn't go back down. But
it doesn't.
Yeah. And so the idea, not only is it easier, but you actually can blow bigger next time because the same air and energy can actually, it's like you said, easier. And so the idea is to get to that point of capacity expansion is how I call it. And eventually what was hard becomes easy. So I call it effortless effort. Still going to give the effort, but like the things that I do are now like, they're so natural. It's effortless effort. It's who I am to do it. So I can stack 10 things and do them no problem. Whereas like one of my 10, you're like, dude, I can't do that this week. And it's like, it's not that you're incapable, but it's just the capacity needs to be expanded to reach that.
Yes. Yeah, it's such a great point, because when people decide like, oh, I'm going to be a runner, like I'm going to start running, right? And they go to do a 5K after sitting on the couch for 2 years of quarantine, they're going to die. Like they're going to feel like they're going to die, right? Yeah. Whereas somebody who runs an Ironman, a 5K is a warm up for them. True. It's no big deal. But what happens is we fool ourselves into thinking, I have to be good at this right away. When like the first time I go to do this, I must be an expert at it. And instead we're not looking at it like, oh, this will one day be my warm up. Right now it's supposed to be challenging. And if we're supposed to challenge ourselves the whole time, then this will become easy, right? And I used to, when I was first trying to get out of debt, I'd make a budget and I'd fail, and I'd make a budget and I'd fail, and I'd be like, oh, I suck at this. I'm terrible at this. And then I started asking people who were really good with money. I was like, how many times did it take you to get the budget perfect? And they all looked at me like I had 4 eyeballs. And they were like,
perfect.
what do you mean? I have never had the budget perfect.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? So instead of looking at the budget like it had to be this all or nothing, like right or wrong framework, I understood it more like a batting average. Like I don't have to get it right every time. I just have to get it right more often than not. I just have to walk a ball. Right? I don't have to swing at everything that like I'm going to make mistakes and it's going to correct and it's going to be okay. And that really allowed me to go, okay, I got like, it gets rid of that perfectionist, that all or nothing thinking, and allows me to just get better and move forward. And that's the key to wealth building. It's the key to all the things.
It's the key to life.
Being okay to get it wrong.
Yeah, that's really it. Can you step in? Like you said, I think it was football was probably the thing that taught me. And that my coach was really big on. He's like, hey, a bad play, take the chip out, put a new one in. Like he's like, take the video game card, put a new one in and keep playing. Because ideally, it's like if you play with that chip, it's corrupt. And you're going to mess all the next plays up, man.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's a meme. You're like the meme master.
I take it from everybody else. I just have a weird brain that collects it all. And I don't think of it until we're in the middle of a conversation. It all comes flowing out of my face. But no, I agree, man. It's a matter of having to go through that point of like, you have to kind of have a short memory, right? But then keep trying it. And then after a while, I think you start finding a little bit more confidence in the effort of trying. Like I tell people all the time, it's not the best to talk to people when they book me for speeches, because this is not what they want to hear. But I go, hey, about 90% of what's going to come out of my mouth, it's going to happen in the moment. I have no idea what I'm about to say when I get up there.
Right.
But that 10% that is on some slides, I promise it's going to guide it. And then it's scary, but I just do my thing and it's a blast. But I get to the point of I've let that guy out of the cage. I trust him and flow. And when you can trust yourself and flow from refinement of failure, it gets better.
I was just going to say, but that's because of your refinement and your practice of things. Like most people, if they get a call like, hey, you're going to come talk on stage in front of 8,000 people, like, what are you going to talk about? They are going to pee their pants.
Shrivel
and so
up,
they're like, they have to have that control because they're so afraid. They don't have that trust that you have that what they're going to say is going to serve. But what you've done is reach this level of excellence where you can just stay present. And that's mastery.
Yeah.
Because in training, when you're learning, right, you can't be present. You're thinking like, okay, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. But eventually you get to that place where there's just self-trust and and that's the identity piece that you're coming up with. And in money, it translates to, I am wealthy.
Yeah.
Like you don't worry so much about like making the decisions. You just trust that when an opportunity comes, you're going to make the right decision because you have that knowing from having practiced for so long.
And done it for a while, over and over and over again. And neurologically, it goes to like you have the prefrontal cortex that when it learns something, it's processing, learning, it takes a lot. But eventually it goes back to the hippocampus. And then it's just kind of like I can ride my bike and chew gum now and talk to somebody. Whereas before I was like, and that's what it is. At the beginning when I was speaking, I was, what am I doing out here? And now it's like, But that only happens if you say what you did. If people do what you talk about, you go and do it, and you might fail. But after a while, it becomes a second nature to what it is. Man, if we could just take this and do like the Matrix and Neo and just pop it into somebody's head, that'd be so amazing.
Amazing.
It'd be amazing. How much do you think accountability matters? Like, is this something where, because if you think about it, it's a very personal thing. Finances are tight to people's, chest. But then people they won't divulge this to friends and family, spouses sometimes, potential spouses. Like, how much can letting someone in on the situation help you?
Well, it has to be the right person, as you know, because oftentimes it's not safe. Like the reason, one partner would have financial infidelity over another partner isn't necessarily because they're a terrible partner. Sometimes it's because it hasn't been safe for that partner to talk about money in a way that's been helpful. Yeah. And so the accountability, I think it matters. I think you have to be in the right community. We have an online community called Get the Hell Out of Debt where we, kind of bring people in and talk openly about it. But even in that community, we don't talk specifics. Like you're never going to give anything that would reveal your actual account numbers or like what's actually happening. We speak in percentages and stuff, and we talk a lot about the emotions behind it.
It's cool.
But what we found is that the reason the community works is because there's a bit of anonymity and nobody's judging you based on their expectations of you. And sometimes if you've been the person in your family system that's always struggled with money, and you go to tell somebody in your rich uncle, for example, like, hey, I'm going to start to get out of debt or whatever, they might roll their eyes and go, oh, sure you are, because they only know the previous version of you, and they're going to hold you to that because that's what makes them comfortable.
Yep.
So really finding somebody who can believe in you, who can come alongside you, who will champion you, usually somebody who's done it before you, can be really helpful because they don't have a preconceived notion of how it needs to be done or how you have to do it. Because the whole point in the whole process is to master your own psychology instead of, somebody else's ideas of how you need to get there.
Yeah, it's big.
I think accountability is critical, but it matters who it is.
It is. That makes sense. It definitely makes sense because there is this tribe mentality for humans to want to be accepted. And so, or to make sure you know what to expect from somebody. So like, one, I want to be part of this group. So when they make fun of me, like I shriveled act down to stay back in the group. But also if somebody starts changing, I'm like, what are you doing? And stop that. That's not who I know. So yeah, if you have the wrong people, it doesn't make sense. The wrong people. How much of this stuff has to do, like, we'll call it, because I always am questioning, like, how is it that someone can be aware of the fact that they don't need that thing? They don't need that. I got someone in my life right now. I'm not going to say names. This person will never listen to the podcast, so it doesn't make a difference. But there's this thing like this person bought a vehicle that they can't afford. In fact, they have a vehicle that they don't make very much revenue and income at all. They bought a vehicle that is expensive or more expensive than my wife's brand new car, and she makes great money. And in my head, it's like that. It's detrimental to this person's children and their schooling and all this stuff. And I'm like, is there something that if they don't have that, the judgments become this issue? Like, how much of this is driven by the judgments or perspective of other people that they probably don't even care about in the first place?
Yeah, it's like, oh gosh, unfortunately, we just live in that society, right? Where a couple things are happening. There is that pressure, but there's also the like, oh, these easy monthly payments, which seem manageable in the moment because we don't have an actual look at what the long-term cost is. Yeah. We'll often put like, people will think, oh, I have a $500 car payment, but it's at 0% interest. So they think, oh, it's free money. But when you take $500 a month and you put it in a compound interest calculator and you look at what that would, like what that actually costs you out of retirement, it's millions of dollars. Yeah. So now your little Toyota 4Runner isn't just $500 a month. It's millions of dollars out of your future retirement if you're not careful. So it actually has nothing to do with 0% interest. Yeah. But we get sold on those things. But the fine line in that happens like, this friend of yours might actually be stepping into a new identity. So we have to really be careful that we don't put too much judgment on them, because sometimes what happens is if you've lived in a broke mentality for a long period of time, the solution isn't always to cut expenses, cut expenses, cut expenses. Sometimes the solution is to expand into something bigger. So sometimes the thing that actually calls us forward into making more money is to like moving into just an uncomfortable band of wealth that maybe is going to require more of us to sustain, as long as they're doing the other work on the other side too, right? You can't just be driving around in a Maserati being like, I'm going to own a jet one day. Like you know what I mean? You got to be working to get there. And
then hang on your mom's couch saying that the secret said I can make $1 million. The secret said I can make $1 million. I do get that. It's funny. It's almost like you outkick the coverage, they call it in football. You kick it out and try to catch up, or like it's like kicking the ball, running up to it. And
it's dangerous, but it is. In rare, like I'd say about 8% of the population, that is what has to happen in order for them to get out of debt, because cutting the expenses is it's lack mentality and it's lack thinking and
I get that. Now, I'm not going to say this person does that, because I'm very I feel like I'm aware that that's not what they're doing.
Okay.
Although it sounds great, and I think I'm thinking of me. I mean, there's some things that I commit to, and I see what you're saying, because I'll commit to some things. Like this year, we have some things team-wise for the goals, and I know there's going to be a certain point in the next, I think the end of the second quarter, like 5-ish months from now, where certain things have to happen plan-wise, and I know what we have to shoot for to get that. So we've kicked the ball on purpose. However, I know it calls me to do more, and I like that. I like.
What did you call it? What's it called in football? I got to write it down.
Outkick your coverage.
Outkick your coverage.
You don't want to outkick your coverage. Typically, you don't want to outkick your coverage, but because if you outkick the coverage, they get the ball farther back, and then like it's hard for people to cover. They spread out, right? But
it's a risk.
It is a risk. It really is. Yeah. But sometimes outkicking the coverage you have that 1 or 2 people that can go out there and make that play way downfield, and now boom, you get the ball in a great place for your team. But it is called out kicking the coverage, and I like that perspective. I never thought of it that way until you said it. I've always
and
been
you have to
like,
be careful because like that's the thing that makes the highlight reel on Sportsnet.
True.
But it's not how the majority of the game is played.
no,
So you can't be making all your plays.
based on
Look at me, I'm using sports.
I like
words
it.
I know what I'm talking about.
Hey, it works though. It is. You're right. Because it's like, for example, if it's like a tough game and I need to kick the ball, if it's football, right? I got to kick the ball, punt the ball to this team, and I need them to be as far back in their own end zone area as possible. And we're in this area. Well, if I kick the ball too far, what happens is my defense, they get spread out. There's bigger holes for someone to run through and get big plays on us. But man, if I kick it down and one of my guys can make the tackle down there and he can close that hole up, it's amazing for us, but it's risky, right? So it is a sports thing because you get that one dude in open field, 53 yards wide, and he just goes and gets an ankle and dude falls down. It's like, it's amazing. We got him. And you can win the game. Yeah. But it's a risk, and I think I got you like that because at the same time, it's like I'll do it if I'm like, you got Anthony Trucks in the field, hey, kick it, he got it. Like, you see what I did there?
I did see what you did. Identity, it was so good.
Oh man, it's who I see myself to be. This is beautiful. I want to unpack the book a little bit. We have a little bit more time. This book, it's a cool name, by the way. Get the hell out of debt. It's simple, clean, clear. It's got a cool picture of a bike on there. What was the book when you first wrote it? Like, where did it come from, and who is it really, really for?
Well, we were about to do this massive event in San Jose in March 2020, and we were expecting 12,000, 15,000 people in a SAP center. I think that's what it's called, where the San Jose Sharks play.
Yep.
And COVID shut us down. And for the first time ever in decades of my boss's career, we had to cancel our first event. And so I had to fly home. It was like everything got scary. Things were shutting down. And the phone calls started. People were like, Erin, what do I do about money? I'm so scared about money. I'm like, and it just was overwhelming. And I thought, what is the way I can reach the most amount of people the fastest? And so I just decided to write the book. Thankfully, it got picked up by a publisher, all the things. Yeah. But what was interesting to me was I really wrote it for the 20-year-old version of me. I wrote it for the version of me that really ought not to have gotten to debt in the first place. So the way the book is divided, it's in 3 phases. The first phase is really just the financial foundation. It's how does money work? How do you work with money? Understanding how to actually pull all the pieces together, and just basically all the things that I wish I had known when I was younger. If you don't have any consumer debt, you skip right over to phase 3 and do wealth building. But if you do have consumer debt, phase 2 is really all about how to pay that down and how to pay it down aggressively and effectively. So most people who are really, messed up financially, they'll often take out a consolidation loan, or they'll do a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, depending on what part of the world they live in. And that takes about 5 to 7 years, sometimes up to 10 years to sort out. This program gets you out of debt. You pay every penny that you owe, but you're out in 18 months to 2 years. Some people as early as 6 months. It just depends on how aggressive you want to be. Yeah. And there's 4 different methods, and it's like choose your own adventure based on the psychology that you determined you had in phase 1. Yeah. And then in phase 3, you take everything you've learned and what you've practiced in those muscles that you've built up, and you do the same thing, except for now you're doing it by buying assets instead of paying down liabilities. And it accelerates wealth building really quickly. And so I really just wrote it because I thought that all of the books that I'd read about money were written by middle-aged guys in suits who were boring and dry. And I just I didn't get it. I just wanted something with a little more sass, a little more meat. The language in the book is a little bit questionable.
Your boss has one. It's 7 feet thick too. I haven't read it. I bought it, but didn't read it yet. It's just right. That is a mouthful.
And I talk about how, you got to be the boss of your own life, but I liken it to being a dominatrix. There's some funny, silly stories. There's just some questionable, but to drive points home, not just for shock value, right? It's really meant to be fun.
I used to have a client, odd thing, real sidetrack. He had a client that actually owned a dungeon. The weirdest conversations ever, this man. Anyways, we'll keep going.
You know what? Hey, no judgment here. But we joke about how oftentimes we've been submissive with our money. And so you got to roll up your PVC gloves and now you're the boss of it kind of thing. So that's sort of more what we're talking about.
I like that.
however people choose
it's
to.
funny you say you wrote it for 20-year-old you, because I've got a feeling that there are people probably 40 operating off 20-year-old them. So it's probably going to
Yes.
help anybody.
Yeah, but here's the problem, right? Is that we like, in the Get the Hell Out of Debt program, the online program, we have everybody from young people to people who thought they'd never been able to retire and now are retiring, right?
Yeah.
But I'll always, like, when the young people come in and they're like, I'm 22, I feel like and all the 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds are like, no, it's not too late, right? Everybody wishes they had known when they were younger, right?
Yeah.
But it isn't too late. We've had people who are, in their 60s and just crippled with debt, and just by reallocating assets and paying things down differently and them understanding the flow of money in and out of their lives, like retire. We have this one amazing woman graduated a couple of years ago. She retired from Canada down in Arizona now, thought she'd never be able to retire.
Yeah.
And we just did it with some creative things, like she's renting out her house on Airbnb and she's paid off all her debt and she's, conserving money and she's doing some cool things on the side. And like, there are ways to do it that aren't, like, if you keep doing things the way this, right? If you keep doing things the way you've been doing them, you're going to get the same results over and over. So it's just shifting and thinking, right? And so it's the book is like fun and it's silly, but it's practical. And I just needed a book written by a woman, and I needed a book that was global, because I would find, like, you can be friends with somebody in Australia and they can be your best friend, and you can do this book together. Like, you don't both have to be American. You don't have to both be from the UK. Like, it's got the concepts and everything that you need, no matter who you are or where you are, that will help you find the right people to get where you want to go.
Yeah.
You don't have to feel intimidated going to sit across from a banker who is going to give you advice that they're going to profit from. This is about education and working together, and then ultimately so that you can help other people, especially people who are affected by systemic poverty or other issues that they can't necessarily overcome.
Or like other generations beyond you that don't get these lessons until too late. It's one of those things like, man, why isn't this book in schools? Like, that's the thing that always throws me. It's the thing that we all use, the entire world, and no one teaches you really how to do it. They're like, look at the stars, guys.
They don't teach you how to think, right? They teach you what to think. And that's the dangerous part about money, is it requires you, like, if the school were to teach money, it would be, here's how to have a good credit score. Here's how to get into debt. Here's how to find a good job and stay in it for 30 years and pay it off. That's what they would teach. So we don't want them to teach us.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. But you're
I'm not
right.
trying to be right. I'm just trying to.
It's one of those things, because it's a whole other conversation we're not going to start, because I'm like, yeah, they should teach it in schools, but they don't even teach anything right anyways. They write the dang history books and their lies, and that's anyways. It's a conversation. Yes. Oh, man, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. And I didn't even know I was going to talk to you today. I thought it was somebody else. It's great. If I want people to come find you and get all this goodness, where would I send them?
Well, I'm all over the internet at Erin Skye Kelly. You can just Google that. But also, if you want information specifically about the book or about money, you just go to getthehelloutadebt.com.
Got it. Awesome. Last question. You know what it is?
What?
Here's the last question. What promise did God make to the world when he created you?
Yes, this question is like your first question. Like, why should we listen to you? Your last question. Of course, I should have known. I love this question so much. And this is like probably my favorite thing that you do, because I really think without this question, we are all wandering aimlessly. And so if you are needing help with your money, answering this question for yourself is really critical. But for me, it's really about, like, my entire purpose. I say this in the book, like, God, let my life be a love letter to you, which probably sounds super inappropriate now that I've told you that I'm joking about dominatrix and stuff in the book. But the purpose is really about making everybody feel seen and heard and loved wholly and completely for who they are today, but also able to call them into who it is they are created to be. So I really feel like that's
a good one.
Sort of where it all lands. What about you? Tell me your answer.
It changes, man. I don't know. It's weird. I think that at the beginning, I thought I had to know what it was. And then I realized that it changes date. I've had people ask me that, and one day it's one thing and one it's the other. I think overarching, though, the promise is that my life gets to be an example of a way to live it beyond what the world expects it to be.
Right? Yes, because you are not stereotypical at all.
Not typically, no. I'm a weird statistic on paper. But I think that's the thing, is we all are, though. While people go, man, hard childhood, a lot of crazy, done some cool things, the NFL, it's all great, all grand. I love it. I also realized that that's just my life, man. And really no one cares about me. Like they do, people are like, oh, cool. But like they're worried about themselves. And so if I could be an example, it's that it's not the age old, like I did it, you can too. Or like you can, doesn't matter where you start, where you finish. It's just like, here's an example of how to go against what everybody else will tell you is supposed to take place.
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
You live with love though, too. Like yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. You live that out without being, because here's what's interesting is a lot of people talk a lot, like they preach a lot about like what should happen, but you live it first, which is
All
super
day.
cool.
Yeah. It keeps me congruent too. Like my wife would be the first to poke if something's off. She's like, why are you saying that? You didn't do that. Shut up. But now there's this desire, and I don't do it to be like, here's the odd part. I'm not heavily on social from a story standpoint in reels. I need to be. I'm not living my life in a way to like say, look at, I love my kids. Here, kid, come over here. Okay, get away when the picture's done. Like this is legitimately my life, and I do it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should share this, and then I find ways to share it. But I'm just trying to live life really, really cool for my family, for my God, for my mom. That's it. And then in a weird way, I was gifted some skills and abilities that allow me, from a compassion standpoint, to share it in a way that helps. And so it's a good little, at one point I found out, I don't even know if I found it out or whatever, maybe somebody said, but I believe it's beautiful when you find something you love that you do, that people love that you do.
Yes. Meme. That's a meme.
It's a good one. We got to rock and roll
If
with this.
somebody is like good at Canva and they listen to this conversation, you just got yourself like 30 social media posts.
I'm telling my team, that's what they do. They're phenomenal at Canva. I'm gonna let them know, hey, listen to this, guys, and get some gold from this. Awesome. Thank you so much. Seriously, Erin, I appreciate your personality, your energy, your perspective. We could have a beer together. We could go hang out, have a beer. I don't drink much beer, but
I don't either. But I would go with you, and I would have a water.
You get the idea behind it. Thank you so much for hanging out. Seriously, thank you guys for tuning in and hanging with us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you chose to come and hang with us. If this episode helped you in any way, please do me a favor, rate, review, share all the good stuff. Make sure you go get the book, Get the Hell Out of Debt. If there's someone in your life that needs to hear this conversation, share it directly with them, because sometimes they need to get perspectives that are not yours from people that are credible, and Erin most definitely is that. Outside of that, as always, make the most of your Shift moments so you can make shift happen. It's Anthony Trucks and Erin Skye Kelly signing off. Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Shift podcast. I pray that we gave something amazing to your life. And if you found this episode served you in some way, I would love if you could share it with people you know, people you love, as well as your community, because you never know who needs that simple little seed that can grow into something amazing for their life. And the actual training doesn't stop here. If you want your free copy of the show notes sent to you after every episode so you can get the major points consolidated down, simply go to textanthony.com and message the word notes. Till next time, make shift happen.